Welcome back to my YouTube channel. In this particular video, I'll be taking you through Lab 4.2, the lab on configuring AAA. So as we know, AAA is a security mechanism. The acronym stands for Authentication, Authorization, and Accounting. Authentication used to verify users who are permitted to access the network. Authorization, on the other side, authorizes the users to use particular services, while accounting records the network resources that are used by the user. Now, generally, AAA can be implemented using multiple protocols, but the main protocol that is used when you're using a AAA server is Radius. In this lab activity, we're not going to use a Radius server. We are going to configure a local AAA to manage and control resources for remote Telnet users. So the objectives, you're going to learn how to configure local AAA, how to create a domain, how to create a local user, and also to understand domain-based user management. The network topology. The network topology is here. So we have two routers, R1 and R2. R1 will act as the Telnet client, while R2 will act as the Telnet server. So R2 is going to authenticate R1 in order for R1 to be able to access it via Telnet. So R2 here is called the authenticator, while R1 is called the authenticated. Okay, so that's what we're supposed to do. Configure AAA on R2 so that it can be the authenticator. Okay, so let's see how to do that. So on the configuration roadmap, we are supposed to first create a AAA scheme, then create a domain, then we apply the AAA scheme to the domain. So that's what we are going to do, and then we create a local user. Okay, so I'm already done with step 1, naming the router and configuring the IP address of the two interfaces that are interconnecting the routers. So we will just go ahead and configure the AAA scheme. Configuring the AAA scheme is quite easy. You begin by the command AAA, then you enter. Remember, we are doing this on the authenticator on R2. So we're going to use the AAA command in order to get into the AAA view, and then in the AAA view we can be able to use the command authentication scheme, and we name the scheme. Then we choose the mode, the authentication mode. Similarly, we are going to enter into the authorization scheme using this command and choose the authorization mode. So that is what we are supposed to do on step number 2. So let's exactly do that on R2. So you should be on system view in order to get into AAA like that. Then you start by authentication scheme like that. Then we are supposed to call it datacom. So that's the name of the scheme that we are creating. Then after that, we can be able now to choose the authentication mode. If I do question mark here, you see that we have local, excuse me, we have local authentication. We have the using the Huawei terminal access control server, or non-authentication, or Radius. So this time we've been told to use the local authentication. So I'll type local, then enter. I'll quit. Then do the same now for the authorization. Authorization scheme. Again, we are calling this datacom. Then authorization mode, question mark. So you can see for authorization, we have the Huawei protocol one. We have another one called if authenticated. Please read about this. Then we have local authentication. Authorization, and we have none. Okay, so let's go ahead and choose local. which is what you're supposed to do here. So, oh, sorry, I misspelled. This authorization scheme and I called it datacom with an E. So we can either undo or we can simply use this in the next step. So let's just use this on the next step. Okay, so let's move on. So a device that functions as a AAA server is called a local AAA server, which then can perform only authentication and authorization, but not accounting, as we know. So local AAA servers require users. It requires a user database that contains the username and password, and also authorization information of local user. A local AAA server is faster and cheaper than a remote AAA server. But as you might have guessed it already, the disadvantage of using local is that it has a smaller storage capacity. So let's go on to step number 3. In step number 3, we are supposed to apply the AAA scheme to the domain. So we begin by creating a domain called datacom. So AAA and then domain, then datacom. Okay, then after that we can apply the authentication and authorization schemes that we created. Okay. So sorry, domain datacom, like that. So we are in the datacom domain, then authentication scheme datacom, then authorization scheme datacom with an E at the end, because that is what we called it, like that. Okay, so that is it about step number 3 in applying the schemes to the domain we've just created. So the last step, or step number 4, really is creating a local user. We want to call this user HCIA and use the @delimiter to add him to the datacom domain. The password for this user, HCIA-datacom. So after doing that, we want to enable the Telnet service for this user. So local user HCIA @datacom, service type Telnet, like that. Then we must configure a privilege level of 3 or above for this person to be able to access Telnet. So let's do exactly that. Okay. So local user HCIA at the domain, which is datacom. Let me do that so that you can be able to see it better. Okay. So local user datacom, password cipher HCIA -datacom, like that. Okay. Then local user HCIA datacom. Then we want to enable the service type Telnet, like that. Then local user HCIA datacom, privilege level, to set the privilege level to 3, like that. Okay, so once we've done that, the last step will be now to enable the Telnet function on R2. By default, this function is enabled by default on some devices. But let's just enable it. So the command on step number 5 here is telnet server enable on system view. Then, while we are we're also supposed to create the user interface using the command user interface VTY. Then we create the interfaces. Then we select the authentication mode as AAA. So let's do that. On R2, So we want to do Telnet enable like that. Then interface VTY. Okay, let me just confirm that. Or user interface. I'm forgetting. Okay, so it's supposed to be user interface VTY 0 space 4. Then we want the authentication mode question mark. So authentication mode can be none, password where you want to set a specific password, or AAA. So we want to use AAA. So AAA like that. Okay, so once we've done that, now anyone that wants to access this device via Telnet, they'll have to be authenticated using AAA. On the AAA, of course, we've created a scheme and also a domain that we've applied those schemes, authorization and authentication scheme on. Okay, so that is exactly what we'll be doing in the next step, which is step number 6. We simply go to R1 and telnet to R2. So the command to do that is telnet, then the IP address of R2. So when we do that, it's going to ask us to log in. So we are supposed to enter a username and a password in order to be able to telnet to R2. So let's try that. We will first try with a wrong username and password and see what happens. So we want to use the telnet command, telnet 10.1.1, oh sorry, 10.0.12.2, like that. So username HCIA hyphen, no, it's supposed to be HCIA at datacom, like that. The password, let me just enter a wrong one for now. So I've just entered a wrong password. So you see, if I enter a wrong password, it says local authentication is rejected because I've entered the wrong one. Okay, let me enter a correct one. Remember, we are on R1. We are on R1. So HCIA. Oh, sorry. Let me just press enter. I pressed enter by mistake there. So let me enter the username HCIA at datacom. Then the password HCIA hyphen datacom with a capital, and good. So you can see that indeed, even though I'm in R1, I now get the interface of R2, and I can be able to change a few things here. I can be able, for example, to display a IP interface brief. And you can see that indeed this is the detail. This is the IP address of R2, the interface on R2, 10.0.12.2. So indeed we are on R2. So generally that is how local authentication works. And in this particular lab, we've been able to explore how to configure authentication scheme, authorization scheme, how to create a domain, how to create a user, enable the service for a user, and also how to telnet to a different device. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. I hope you've learned. That is all for this lab. Asanteni sana.